Imagine the evening of November 8, 2016. Donald Trump, a celebrity businessman, a political outsider, was not expected to win. Even his own campaign team, according to Michael Wolff in his book Fire and Fury, inside the Trump White House anticipated a defeat. And yet, William, here we are, talking about his unexpected victory that shocked the world.
It is fascinating, Alina. The campaign began with an almost reluctant candidate and an organization in chaos. It's worth noting the role Steve Bannon played in advancing a rather unorthodox strategy. He essentially crafted an insurgent message, one that broke traditional norms of decorum and energized a disenfranchised voter base. That unfiltered populism proved pivotal.
Right. And while his win was historic, the clashes began almost immediately, starting with the inauguration. Trump wasn't just celebrating victory, he was furious about the media's portrayal of the inauguration crowd size. Do you remember Sean Spicer's vitriolic press briefing?
Oh, how could one forget? Spicer made his debut as press secretary by fiercely defending what he called the largest audience to ever witness an inauguration period. A headline-grabbing statement, and, frankly, one easily debunked. It set a precedent for what would become a cornerstone of Trump's White House, a willingness to undermine facts in service of a narrative.
Absolutely. And then came Kellyanne Conway's infamous term, alternative facts, which redefined how the administration engaged with the press. It wasn't just a soundbite, it became symbolic of their philosophy. Instead of playing defense, they escalated to outright confrontation.
Indeed, Alina. That term, alternative facts, wasn't just a framework for handling controversies. It was also a reflection of the deeper cultural and ideological divides the administration seemed to thrive on. The press, already skeptical, now became a full-blown adversary, resulting in a combative atmosphere both inside the administration and nationally.
Which leaves us to wonder, how much of this strategy was deliberate versus reactive? I mean, Trump's entire communications approach seemed as much about firing up his base as it was about defending his ego. William, speaking of strategy and chaos, as much as Trump's combative communications reshaped the public narrative, the internal dynamics of his team were equally turbulent. Take Steve Bannon and Jared Kushner, for instance. Their rivalry wasn't just about personal differences, it was a clash of visions that influenced the administration's direction. Wouldn't you agree?
I would, Alina. And what's particularly striking is how these two men personified distinct ideological factions. Bannon championed nationalist, anti-establishment policies, often laced with a kind of radical isolationism. Kushner, conversely, leaned toward a more centrist and pragmatic approach. Their differences were irreconcilable.
Exactly. Remember the reports of Bannon bluntly referring to Kushner as a globalist? The administration wasn't just ideologically torn, it was at war with itself. And then you throw in Anthony Scaramucci, that brief, fiery tenure as communications director, and it's chaos upon chaos.
Ah yes, Scaramucci, a perfect microcosm of the dysfunction. His tenure lasted just 11 days, but in that short time, he managed to publicly berate senior staff members, contributing greatly to Reince Priebus's departure as chief of staff. It was less a functioning administration and more a revolving door of intrigue and infighting.
You know, reading Michael Wolff's account, it does feel like a reality show, but with actual consequences. And yet, Trump appeared to thrive in this chaos, pitting his top advisors against one another. Was there method to this madness, or was it simply a lack of leadership?
That is the central question, Alina. Historically, presidents have faced internal divisions before. Look at Abraham Lincoln's team of rivals, or Lyndon Johnson's strained relationships with his cabinet during Vietnam. But Trump's approach was uniquely erratic. Instead of managing conflicts, he seemed to foment them, either for entertainment or as a way to retain ultimate control.
It makes you wonder how anything got done. I mean, We're talking about a White House where ideological purity seemed more important than competency. And with someone like Bannon openly undermining colleagues through leaks and public criticisms, it's no wonder the administration often appeared paralyzed.
Agreed. The dysfunction had real consequences. The administration's failure to push through key policies, like health care reform, stemmed in large part from this lack of cohesion. And let's not forget the overlapping Russia investigations, which only deepened the internal suspicion and paranoia.
What's fascinating, though, is how all this turmoil didn't seem to shake Trump's base. If anything, it solidified their support for him, seeing him as the outsider fighting against the establishment, even within his own team.
True. It's a testament to the strength of his populist appeal, which Bannon, for all his flaws, knew how to amplify. However, it also underscores the fragility of this administration, reliant on division rather than unity. And as we've seen throughout history, divisions of this magnitude rarely remain sustainable for long.
Reflecting on the many rivalries and fractured relationships within Trump's administration, it's clear how pivotal these dynamics were to the ongoing complexities of governance. But before we dive deeper into unpacking these layers, I want to quickly mention, if you're enjoying these conversations, why not subscribe? Supporting us helps grow this podcast community and ensures we can keep bringing you insightful discussions like these.
And not just that, subscribing ensures you won't miss the nuances we explore here each week. Context matters. Together, we're unpacking this pivotal moment in American political history, step by step, layer by layer.
Exactly. Plus, it's the easiest way to stay connected with all our episodes. We're here for the long haul, and we'd love to have you join us in this journey. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button.
Thank you for helping us continue this dialogue. Now, let's return to understanding Trump's approach to diplomacy through the personal connections he forged and their impact on foreign policy.
Building on what we just discussed about the personal dynamics within Trump's administration, it's fascinating how this preference for personal connections extended to his dealings with foreign leaders. From his direct summit with Xi Jinping at Mar-a-Lago to his much-publicized camaraderie with Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia, he clearly favored personal relationships over traditional diplomatic channels.
Unconventional is a perfect description, a leaner. For instance, the meeting with Xi Jinping highlighted Trump's preference for theatrics. By hosting the summit at his private resort, he interwove diplomacy with his personal brand. And while this may have created a spectacle, it hardly secured lasting policy results. In fact, his dealings with Xi primarily involved flattery, consolidating a transactional rather than strategic relationship.
And then there's Saudi Arabia. That first foreign trip to Riyadh was grandiose, a spectacle of swords, glowing orbs, and massive arms deals. Mohammed bin Salman played the optics game masterfully, didn't he?
Oh, absolutely, a leaner. It was clever, both symbolically and diplomatically. The Saudi leadership understood Trump's admiration for opulence and pageantry and used it to their advantage. Yet beneath the fanfare, cracks emerged. The promises of economic reform and a united stance against extremism were overshadowed by regional conflicts and mounting human rights concerns.
Which brings us to Trump's focus on symbolic rather than substantive wins. Let's not forget the infamous travel ban. Introduced within days of his swearing-in, it caused chaos at airports and sparked nationwide protests. The rollout was, well, tumultuous might be an understatement.
Indeed, a leaner. The so-called Muslim ban exemplified the administration's inclination to prioritize optics over preparation. Legal challenges exposed its flaws, with courts striking it down repeatedly before a watered-down version prevailed. Yet, the chaos itself seemed intentional. Steve Bannon even reportedly celebrated it as a deliberate provocation, aimed at showcasing decisive action and cornering political opponents.
A strategy rooted in division, clearly. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room, the Russia investigation. The question of foreign interference and transparency hung over the administration like a cloud from the very beginning. Its revelations about governance. What do you make of them?
They are profoundly significant. The investigation illuminated more than just electoral interference. It revealed the administration's ongoing struggle with accountability. Trump's dismissive attitude toward norms and constraints, combined with his reluctance to address the investigation earnestly, eroded public trust in ways we're still grappling with today. It underscored the tension between personal loyalty and institutional duty within his team.
And ironically, while the investigation undercut trust from some quarters, it seemed to reinforce his outsider narrative among his base, painting him as the target of a so-called deep state. That dual effect is fascinating, isn't it?
It is, Alina. It reflects the polarization of modern politics. The same events that alarmed many Americans drew others closer to him, solidifying support in an increasingly tribal political landscape. And that polarization wasn't just political, it became cultural and social, rippling far beyond Washington.
Speaking of this polarization and its ripple effects, William, it's a perfect segue into understanding the broader cultural and political landscape shaped through those tumultuous years. Trump's White House, as vividly recounted in Michael Wolff's Fire and Fury. What a journey, William, a roller coaster of conflicts, strategies, and implications.
Indeed, Alina. It's remarkable how this administration navigated, or perhaps embraced, the constant chaos. Whether you found it fascinating, alarming, or somewhere in between, there's no denying it was a period that reshaped American politics in profound ways.
Absolutely. So, to all our listeners, thank you for joining us. We're always thrilled to have your company as we dissect some of the most critical chapters in modern history. If you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and subscribe. It's the best way to stay with us for every step of this conversational journey.
And don't forget to share your thoughts. We love hearing your insights, questions, and feedback. Engaging with you, our thoughtful and curious audience, is what makes this endeavor so rewarding.
Exactly. And don't be shy about leaving a review. It fuels our enthusiasm to bring you more of these meaningful discussions.
On that note, Alina, I look forward to our next exploration. But for now, let's leave our listeners with this reflection. Turbulent times demand critical thinking and a deep understanding of history to navigate forward successfully.
What a powerful thought to end on, William. Thank you again for tuning in, everyone. Take care, and we'll see you next time on the Power Book of Podcasts.